I'm really glad to have the opportunity here to speak with Dr. Jen Heerwig. Dr. Heerwig is an associate professor of sociology and political science at Stony Brook University. And I became aware of Dr. Heerwig's scholarship on Seattle and democracy vouchers, which we'll be talking about today. Many years ago, she and her co-author, Brian J. McCabe, who's an associate professor of sociology at Georgetown University, have written a new book on democracy vouchers and the promise of fairer elections in Seattle. That's a bit of a compendium looking back on the past several election cycles in which democracy vouchers have been in use in Seattle. And there's really no one better to sort of speak to the impacts that the Democracy Voucher Program has had in democratizing the campaign finance landscape in the city of Seattle and the state of Washington. A really exciting program. So thank you so much for being here, Jen. And if you'd like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the history of the book that you published on democracy vouchers.
Thanks so much for having me here today. So I'm Dr. Jen Heerwig, and I've been researching the Democracy Voucher Program since its inception in 2017, which was the first cycle of the program. My co-author and I actually got interested in the program before it even began, and we watched it kind of phase in and then grow in 2019 and 2021. And then after the 2021 cycle, which was the first voucher cycle that voters in Seattle could use their vouchers in the mayoral election, my co-author and I decided this might be a good time to sort of bring together all of the things we've learned about the voucher program into one place. So the book sort of looks back at the first three cycles of the program and tells the story of how vouchers began in Seattle and what the kind of impact of the program has been on both voters and candidates in Seattle's elections. So this program is a totally novel program. This is the first time the program has been tried in the United States. And the way it works is that each local election cycle now in Seattle, voters are mailed 4 $25 democracy vouchers. They're like these little blue coupons. They're mailed 4 of them, and voters can then use those vouchers to give to qualified candidates in their local election. So, for instance, in 2017, which was the first cycle, in that election cycle, voters could use their vouchers for the 2 at-large city council races and the race for city attorney. And then in 2019, the program included the races for districted city council. And then finally, in 2021, the races included the city attorney, at-large city council, and the mayoral races in 2021. So they had a wide range of options for 2021. And the way it works is voters in Seattle, once they get their vouchers, they can return their vouchers to a candidate directly. They can put them in the mail and return them to the Democracy Voucher Program to redeem them. And then once a candidate has a voucher or vouchers allocated to the candidate can then redeem those democracy vouchers for real cash to finance their campaign. So the program has really changed the dynamics of fundraising in Seattle and encouraged candidates to talk to voters and future constituents to collect donations rather than relying on the affluent folks that we know usually finance elections. So we looked at the 2013 election and patterns in local election financing in that particular election before the program. And what we found was that Seattle's participation rate in terms of the number of people making donations in local races, that percentage was about 1% of registered voters in Seattle. So after the program began, we saw a very quick and quite pronounced increase in participation. So the first cycle of the program, Seattle went from a participation rate in local campaign finance of about 1% to about 5% in the first cycle. And then by 2021, the percentage of registered voters that were active in local campaign finance reached nearly 10%. So it's actually about a 700% increase relative to 2013 in just 3 cycles of the program. So a really huge increase, I would even say explosion in participation in local campaign finance, with lots of folks using their vouchers and becoming active in financing candidates that they're excited about running for their local races. So the program has really significantly increased the number of new donors, new small donors financing local elections.
And another way of looking at the impact of democracy voucher elections is in renewal of candidates, in terms of enabling more people to donate to candidates they support, enabling more candidates to run.
So when we look at the donor pool in Seattle post Democracy Voucher Program, what we see is that the people who are financing elections out are actually new people, right? The program is bringing new folks into the system. It's not the same old cash donors that Seattle had pre-voucher program. It's actually sort of a new cohort of folks who are getting interested in local politics. And that we've seen that each cycle, right? Each cycle has brought in new voters who are using their democracy vouchers for the very first time and had not previously given cash donations. So it's not merely old cash donors are substituting their vouchers for those cash donations, thus kind of just using public money for their donations instead of using their own private funds. One of the interesting things is that we've seen a significant increase in the number of candidates running for local office. We've also had other signs of increased electoral competition in these local races. So the percentage of incumbents that decide to run for re-election has declined. So the kind of power of incumbency has waned a bit in Seattle. And we've also seen a decrease in the final vote margins. In other words, elections are being won by tighter margins, suggesting that they're getting more competitive as the voucher program has come online and brought more candidates into the system as well as more voters. The folks who donate in elections tend to be much wealthier for obvious reasons. They tend to be more white than the locality that they're donating in. They tend to be much older, right? And just broadly unrepresentative of folks who vote or folks who live in that particular place, right? So one of our goals when we wrote the book was to look at how the program had actually changed the diversity of the donor pool over the 3 election cycles. And we did that in the book for voters, looking at both race, age, and income. And what we found looking at those three things is that post-program, the donors and voucher users in Seattle now look much more like active voters in local elections than do cash donors. So another way of thinking about that is that voucher users contain a higher share of people of color, a higher share of younger folks, and a higher share of lower income folks relative to cash donors. So the program has seemingly broadened the range of folks that are participating in local campaign finance. Those folks are younger, they're more people of color, and they're more lower income relative to those traditional cash donors that would make a kind of hard money donation in a local election. So that's on the voter side. On the candidate side, we've also seen some promising trends. So there's only been 3 election cycles that we researched in the book, and 1 mayoral election. So the number of candidates that we're analyzing is necessarily small. But what we've seen so far is if we look at mayoral elections, we've seen an increase in the percentage of candidates of color running for the mayoral office. We've seen an increase in women. And the average age of mayoral candidates has actually decreased slightly, so they're getting younger. For city council, we've seen an increase in women candidates, and we've also seen a decrease in the mean age. So broadly, candidates in Seattle are now a bit younger than they were before the program, which is closer to the median age in Seattle, which is something like 37. So the candidates are getting younger. We have more women running for office, and we do see signs of more people of color running for mayoral office. And then we'll keep looking at city council as the program progresses.
Yeah, one of the sort of the many striking findings from your research that's included in the book is that among mayoral candidates in Seattle, the percentage who were people of color rose from just over 17% to just over 26% before and after the Democracy Voucher Program was in effect. And in the same way, the percentage of women candidates rose as well. So for for people to understand how the possibility of Democracy Vouchers advancing and bringing in their city, how it can help increase sort of the representation of the city overall.
So as we have this kind of broadening of the candidate pool, we see also a broadening of the people financing local elections. And I think as the program kind of matures and goes through more election cycles, we'll see this pattern play out with more kind of representative candidates running for office and more representative folks financing those elections.